My name is Nora Caldwell, and this morning I opened a letter from the man who disowned me 15 years ago. The envelope was thick, the kind my father used for business deals. Not family. Inside was a single sheet of paper titled Family Financial Note, written in his rigid hand. He was asking me to sign away the $60,000 education trust my mother left for my daughter, Emily. I read it twice before I called him. He answered on the first ring, his voice still carrying that old authority that used to silence every room. "It's not a big deal, Nora," he said. "Victor's business hit a rough patch, and this family takes care of its own." I told him the trust wasn't mine to give, that it belonged to Emily. He paused, then said, "Emily can wait. She's not exactly building empires." "Is she?" The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I heard my brother's muffled laugh in the background, and my father's chair creak the way it always did when he leaned back to end a discussion. "You're signing the papers Sunday," he said. "We'll talk then." The call ended with that familiar click of finality, the sound of someone who had never learned to ask, only to command. I stood there in my kitchen, the letter trembling slightly in my hand, and felt the old house rules echo through me. Sons inherit, daughters obey. Outside, the sun was already burning through the morning haze, bright and merciless. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into a drawer beside my mother's silver ring. He wanted a signature. What he'd get instead was the truth he'd spent his whole life refusing to see. When Sunday came, my father was already seated at the head of the long table, the same chair he'd claimed for 40 years. He didn't greet me, just gestured to the empty seat across from him and said, "We'll make this simple." Victor leaned forward, his tone syrupy with practiced humility. "Nora, this isn't just about me. It's about the family name. I just need a bridge loan. That's all." Paula smirked and swirled her wine. "A bridge loan? You mean another bailout? Don't dress it up." My father's voice cut through the room, sharp and commanding. "Enough! Victor has worked hard for this family, and we will not let him fail." I told him. "He's failed because you never taught him accountability." He slammed his hand on the table. "And you think your self-righteous attitude makes you better than us?" Victor gave a short laugh. "You've always had that martyr tone. Nora, maybe if you'd supported us instead of running your mouth, Emily wouldn't still be an assistant somewhere." I met his eyes. "She's a project engineer. Victor, she earns her life, not borrows it." Paula leaned closer, her perfume sharp as her words. "Please, Nora, Emily's just ordinary. You make it sound heroic to pay rent." My father exhaled hard through his nose. "That's enough of this nonsense. Sign the document, and this family moves forward." Quote. I looked around the table, the three of them waiting like judges over a trial I never asked to attend. "What happens if I don't?" I asked quietly. My father's eyes hardened. "Then you're no longer a Caldwell." The room went still. Victor looked satisfied, Paula almost gleeful. I felt the weight of every silent dinner. Every moment I'd swallowed my words to keep the peace. "You've mistaken obedience for loyalty," I said. "They're not the same." "Date." Paula laughed. "Sharp and ugly. Spare us the poetry. You'll sign because that's what good daughters do." I folded my hands together and said, "Then it's a good thing I stopped being one." My father stared at me, his mouth tightening, his voice dropping low. "Don't walk out that door, Nora." I stood anyway, leaving the unsigned papers between us. I already did. 15 years ago. The silence that followed was heavier than any curse. It was the sound of a dynasty cracking. The next morning I called David Rothman, my mother's old attorney, and asked him to review the trust. He didn't need long. It's airtight. Nora, he said. Irrevocable. Bound by federal education law. The only authorized beneficiary is Emily Caldwell. And only for her tuition and academic costs. I exhaled. Steady but cold. And told him, then my father's demand dies on paper. Up. David's tone softened. He won't like hearing no, I said. He spent his life mistaking silence for consent. This time, silence will be strategy. He asked if I wanted him to send a notice. No, I said. Let them believe I'm considering it. People show their truest selves when they think they're winning. He laughed quietly. You're your mother's daughter. Eyes. That evening, Emily came home from work with the same exhaustion I used to wear in my 30s. She saw the folder on the table and frowned. He asked again. Didn't he? I nodded. He did. And he expects me to fold like always. She sank into the chair across from me. What are you going to do? I told her. Nothing loud. Just right. She smiled without humor. That's your version of revenge. Isn't it? I looked at her, seeing both the child who once hid behind my legs and the woman who now built systems smarter than the men who underestimated her. It's not revenge. Emily, it's correction. She tilted her head. Then what do you want me to do? I pointed to the laptop in her bag. Keep building. Keep coding. Don't let their noise into your work. She nodded. Slow and deliberate. You really think they'll learn? I said. People don't learn when you yell at them. They learn when the world stops answering. Later that night, after she went to bed, I opened the drawer where I'd kept the letter and the trust papers side by side. The contrast was almost poetic, one written in arrogance, one in faith. My mother's signature looked steady even after all these years. I traced it with my finger and whispered, I won't let them rewrite you. The ring on my hand caught the light. The engraving, glinting like a promise. Know your worth. The war had already begun. But this time, it would be waged in silence. It started with Victor's name appearing in the local business column under the words, pending litigation. My father called that evening. His voice lined with fury. You could have prevented this, he said. I told him. You mean I could have funded another failure? He barked. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I said. No. I'm observing it. There's a difference. 2 weeks later, Paula showed up at my door. Her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. They froze my account. She said, Victor convinced me to co-sign the loan. I thought he knew what he was doing. I told her. He never did. You just liked believing he did. She laughed bitterly. And you liked believing you were better than us. I said, No, Paula. I liked believing you could learn. When the house was taken, she called again. Her voice flat. They're selling the furniture next week. Dad won't answer my calls. I said. He's busy blaming me. She was quiet for a moment, then whispered, Maybe he's right. I said, If that helps you sleep. Let him be right. The line went dead. And for once, I didn't feel guilt pressing against my chest. A month later, my father came to the hospital lobby unannounced. He looked smaller. His anger diluted into something closer to panic. Your brother's drowning, he said. The bank's after him. And the family name, I stopped him. You raised him to believe that name would save him. It won't. He stared at me, lost for words, and said, You sound just like your mother. I met his gaze. That's the first true thing you've said all year. When he turned away, I realized the dynasty he'd built wasn't collapsing from my refusal, it was collapsing from its own weight. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. tucked inside a plain envelope with my daughter's handwriting across the front. Inside was a single page and a check copy clipped to the corner. Emily wrote, "Mom, Brightline just closed its first investment, 7 Wit million. We're launching the Helen Caldwell Foundation next quarter. It's for women in engineering. Scholarships and job training. I wanted you to see what Grandma's gift became." Her words were steady. The ink pressed deep like conviction. That night I called her, the phone ringing only once before she answered. "You read it?" she asked. I said, "Twice." She laughed softly. "You always did double-check everything." I told her. "You've done more than I ever imagined," she said. "No. Mom, you imagined it first." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet felt full. Not empty. I heard the confidence in her voice, the kind that doesn't come from winning, but from surviving right. When the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table with the letter spread before me, the paper glowing under the lamplight. My mother's name printed in that foundation. Title looked like closure written in ink. I whispered, "You'd be proud of her." "Mom." The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. And for the first time in years, it didn't sound lonely. I folded the letter carefully and slid it beside my mother's ring. The next move, I knew, would no longer belong to my father. The invitation arrived embossed in gold, announcing the Caldwell family dinner at the Magnolia Grand Hotel. My father's signature was stamped at the bottom. And beneath it, the line read, "Press welcome." I knew what it meant. He wanted to parade the name again. To prove it still carried weight. That night, the room was filled with polite laughter and the stale perfume of pretense. My father stood near the podium, his voice commanding the crowd. "The Caldwell legacy has always been about resilience," he declared. "Tonight, we reaffirm who we are." Doc 2. Victor clapped too loudly. His smile stretched thin. "Maybe now people will forget the lawsuits," he whispered to Paula, who lifted her glass and said, "Or at least forgive them." My father noticed me then. "Nora," he said, his tone both warning and invitation. "You came. I wasn't sure you'd still have the courage," I replied. "Courage never needed your permission." "Dad," he smiled tightly. "You still hold grudges like your mother," I said. "And you still confuse truth with disrespect." The silence that followed was immediate, the kind that makes people shift in their seats. Then Emily walked in, calm and deliberate. My father's eyes widened. "You weren't invited," he said. She smiled. "I know. I came for business." Victor scoffed. "What kind of business could you possibly have here?" She set a folder on the table. The Helen Caldwell Foundation just finalized a partnership with the State Technical Council. We're funding vocational programs across North Carolina. Tonight's dinner is conveniently located near our first beneficiary site. My father frowned. "What does this have to do with us?" Emily said. "Everything. The foundation carries this family's name, even if the family didn't earn it." Victor laughed nervously. "You're saying your little nonprofit is a legacy project?" Emily looked at him. "I'm saying it's what legacy should look like, something that gives instead of takes." Paula's voice cracked. "You think a few scholarships make you better than us?" Emily turned to her. "No. Aunt Paula, I think showing up sober and working does." My father's hand tightened on his cane. "You come here to humiliate us," she said. "I came to remind you that decency didn't die with Grandma." His mouth opened, but no sound came. Victor stood, his anger spilling past caution. "You think this changes anything? I built more in a decade than you ever will." Emily met his glare. "You built debt." "Uncle, I built something that doesn't need rescuing," Paula muttered. "Always the martyr's daughter." I said quietly. Better that than the liar's sister. My father's breath came uneven. And for a moment, I thought he'd lash out. But he only sank into his chair. You've turned my family into spectacle, he whispered. Emily leaned forward. No. Grandpa, you did that when you made cruelty tradition. Oh. The reporters exchanged glances. Sensing the fracture, they were invited to celebrate. My father's voice dropped to a rasp. What do you want from me? Emily said. Nothing. Just acknowledgement that you see us now. He stared at her. Eyes clouded with something unsteady. You sound like her, he said softly. Emily nodded. That's the point. I watched him lower his head. The room finally quiet. The legacy he fought to preserve had just been rewritten by the very women he tried to erase. When it ended, I walked past him without a word. He didn't stop me this time. Outside, the hotel lights shimmered against the glass doors, and Emily's reflection stood beside mine. Was that revenge? She asked. I said, no. That was history correcting itself. She smiled faintly. Then I think Grandma would have liked the ending. And as we stepped into the night, I realized the Caldwell name no longer felt heavy, it felt finished. A month after the dinner, the story faded from the papers. But not from memory. I spent my mornings tending the small garden behind my house. The soil cool and quiet beneath my hands. The phone stopped ringing. And for once, the silence felt earned. Emily visited on Sundays, bringing coffee and news stories from her work. And each time she laughed, I could hear the calm my mother never had the chance to find. One evening she stood on the porch and said, Do you ever think you went too far? I smiled. No. I think I finally stopped apologizing. She nodded, watching the sun dip behind the trees. Then we did what we needed to do. I said, We did what was right. The breeze shifted, carrying the faint scent of magnolia. And, for the first time, the past didn't hurt, it just existed. When she left, I sat alone with my mother's ring catching the last light of day. The house no longer felt like proof of survival, but a place meant for living. The Caldwell name could rest wherever it fell. What remained was mine, unborrowed and unbroken. And in that stillness, I finally felt free. Sometimes I still catch myself touching the scar on my heart where their approval used to matter. But it no longer aches. The garden keeps growing. The air stays kind. And Emily's laughter fills every quiet space they once owned. She said last week, Mom, maybe peace was the revenge all along. And I told her, no, peace was the reward. If this story found a place in you, thank you for listening. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories of strength, silence, and women who learn to choose themselves, because sometimes that's the loudest victory there is.